Welcome to the All 7 Days podcast. I'm Stan. That's
Trevor.
Yeah, that's who he is, and he's still in his house quarantined because he's got something. I'm looking at you right now, Trevor, and you have the skunk stripe of Greg.
Right?
From mustache to beard. It's just straight down. You guys check out YouTube.
Crazy.
All 7 Days on YouTube and see. It is the nuttiest looking. I don't know anybody that has that but you. That's cool. What are we doing here? This is the All 7 Days podcast where we're just a couple of guys taking questions and looking at skunk stripes on their mustaches and beards. Send your questions in to askitall7days.com, 864-660-9473. Leave us a voicemail or text, and join the All 7 Days Hangout on Facebook. Check us out on YouTube, like I just said, and you can see Trevor's skunk stripe. It's,
I guess we know what the title of this podcast is going to be.
Yes, I do know what the podcast title is going to be at this point, and I bet you don't. But you will when you see it. I have it in mind. I'm not going to.
That's one thing that I really love is the pictures and then the quirky little name you come up with for each podcast.
I just got one. Hang on, I gotta write it down.
At my expense, I'll take it.
It's going to be great. All right. So what are we doing today? What are you doing today, Trevor? Sounds like you've already had your workout. You slept in, and then
I slept till 8.
Slept till 8 o'clock. Just think of all the productivity you lost by sleeping till 8 o'clock.
I know, right? I could have. What could I have done?
Drawing a blank.
I don't know.
Nothing. I got nothing. I don't know what I could have done.
I washed dishes. I folded laundry. I swept the floors. Drank my coffee, all before going to work out at 10 o'clock.
Did a workout at 10. And what kind of workout was this today? I know you're a CrossFit guy, so it had a lot of different moves to it. But
today was simple, but a lot of reps. So it was a lot of clean and jerks, and then we had.
So what you're saying is it was like a worship song.
Hey!
Simple with a lot of repetition.
Right, and then we had a bunch of weighted step ups. So you had to carry a dumbbell and step up onto a box.
How tall was the box?
2 feet, 24 inches.
That's a pretty big step.
I did 150 of them.
See, my hamstrings would have said 5. That's enough.
Yeah, I got like about halfway, and I was already questioning why I signed up to do that. But once you start, you can't stop. So
well, that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. Yeah, you're right. I'm more into the endurance type stuff. Mm-hmm. So when I have any kind of semblance of physical shapeness to me, I do the endurance stuff because I can't build muscle mass. I don't know why. So I guess I'm just more prone to let's go do this activity for a really long time. And so the very first time I rode the Assault on Mount Mitchell, if you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's a pretty great bike ride in South Carolina and North Carolina. I was halfway up the Blue Ridge Parkway, approaching Mount Mitchell, and the whole time I was thinking, if anyone offers me a ride in one of these SAG vehicles, I'm going to take it.
Take it.
But I'm not going to ask for one. But if they offer me a ride, I'm getting in.
Did you ride with your thumb out like you were hitchhiking?
I couldn't let go of the handlebars or I would have crashed because the hill was so steep. Oh, man. Anyway, I'm sure our listeners are just riveted.
They're just
at this point. But
they love it.
They do, I guess. So anyway, we do have a question to answer. And anyway, how are you and Jameson doing? Still quarantined another week later?
We try to get outside, just like in the yard. We kick the soccer ball a lot. We just do stuff outside, just in our space mostly.
Yeah. Well, so
I
this
try to
is
find.
we just came out of Easter weekend. This is Easter Monday, I think they call it. So, what did you do for Easter?
Well, I was alone yesterday, and it rained all day.
It was bad. It was a very stormy, nasty day yesterday here.
So I went and worked out.
Guess what I did this weekend? It took
Uh,
it took me
what?
Friday and Saturday to complete this task, and I almost blew my house up doing this. So what do you think I did over the weekend?
You rewired
I
something.
worked on my motorcycle.
Ah,
So
okay.
the motorcycle, since the cancer stuff happened, a little over a year ago now, the motorcycle has been sitting in the garage, and the carburetor got gummed up. So I had to clean
Hmm.
the carburetor. So I've never done anything like this. Usually when I work mechanically, I fix one thing to break three.
Right.
That's just the kind of the way it does. So Friday I got the carburetor off. So what was happening? It's actually a dual carburetor bike. So it's a twin cylinder. It's a Triumph. So it's got two carburetors, one for each cylinder, and it was only firing on one cylinder. So everything, all the research I did said your carburetor's gummed up. One of them's working, one of them's not. So I took the thing off, which was a feat unto itself, and cleaned it and put it back together. And then when I fired it up, the opposite cylinder was firing.
So you had
so,
to do it again, right?
so no, so I was just really frustrated. I just left it. I left it in the garage. In the middle of the night, our dog Rocky gets up and he needs to go potty. So I get up with him. I go in the living room and all I can smell is gasoline, and it's bad.
Mm.
And so I go out to the garage where the bike is, and gasoline is literally puddling in the floor. And I'm
Jeez.
like, oh my gosh, what have I done? So I open the garage door, which after I hit the button, I was scared to death because, it's an electrical thing. And if it had sparked, the house is going up. I roll the bike out of the garage. I get towels. I dry up all the gas. And I left the gas turned on the bike. So I turned it
Right.
off, and the dripping stopped. And the bike is dry. I can't find it anywhere. I don't know where it's coming from. So the next day, I get on the Google machine and I find out, well, when you reassemble these things, sometimes the float bolt, which floats up when it's got enough gas, and when it drops down, it's works kind of like a toilet, right? When the float
Right.
comes down, the gas turns on, and when it fills up in the carburetor, it shuts it off. Sometimes they'll get stuck. So if you take a screwdriver handle and just whack the side of the thing, a lot of times it'll fix it. So I did, and it did, and I fired it up, and it's running great. So, so I did fix it, but I almost blew the house up in the process. So if you're ever considering me to work on your motorcycle, make sure your house insurance is in
Yes, up
fully
to
paid.
date when you come to work on it.
That's right. So anyway, once again, riveting story for our listeners. And so anyway, we've got a great question though coming up. It is the question about Jacob wrestling with God. So we'll take a quick break. This is the All 7 Days podcast. Welcome back to the All 7 Days podcast. I'm Stan. That's
Trevor.
and we're going to answer Robert's question today. He's looking at the scripture about Jacob wrestling with God, and he wants to know what we should get from that story. That's a that's a crazy. It's a crazy scripture. It's a crazy story
Hmm.
to get to this point. So let me recap the story that gets us to the point of Jacob wrestling with God, and I think it'll give us a little backstory for it and help us maybe understand a little bit of what's going on. So, to recap the story, this is very early on in Jewish history, right? We have Abraham, who's chosen by God to go out into the wilderness to occupy a land that he's going to show him, right? And Abraham and his wife Sarah have a son, and his name is Isaac, right? And Isaac has twins by his wife, and that's Esau and Jacob, right? So this is only one generation removed from Abraham. Esau and Jacob are twins. Jacob's hand comes out first, and there's a thread or something tied around his wrist. His hand goes back in, and then his brother Esau comes out first. So Esau is the oldest, which means he's supposed to inherit everything
Right.
from his dad. Firstborn gets the inheritance, the birthright, as they called it. And Jacob and Esau is also the dad's favorite, right? He's hairy. He's like you, Trevor.
Oh yeah.
Like super hairy, and he's also a hunter. He's like a man's man. He is a hunter,
Right.
and
Like me.
yes, like
Man's
you.
man.
Now, Jacob is more the mama's boy. He's more like me, fair skinned, not very good with his hands, but he can cook.
You can cook.
So the story is that Isaac is about to die, and he asks for his son Esau to go kill some venison and fix him this stew that he likes, right? And then while he's gone to hunt the deer, Jacob and his mom cook up this scheme. They kill a goat, fix it like it's the venison that his dad likes. They take the goat skin, paste it on his arms and all around him, so that when he goes in, he can trick his dad, who has now lost his eyesight, by the way, that he is Esau and he will get the blessing of the birthright. So they do that. They steal the birthright, and then, it's like war between brothers at that point. And Jacob has to split town and goes to actually some family members, and where he works for his wife for 7 years.
Mhm.
And after working for his wife for 7 years, he gets tricked, and after the wedding ceremony is over, quote unquote, he realizes that the person he married is not Rebecca, but her sister. Wait, did I get that name right? Anyway, he gets the ugly
Yeah.
sister.
He gets the ugly
He gets
sister.
the weak-eyed, as it says in the Bible. So, but she's older, and he says, well, it's not our tradition to. His father-in-law says, we're supposed to marry our older one first, but if you'll work for me another 7 years, you can have the other sister. So he does. So he works for 14 years for these two wives. I think he got shorted there. But, he has kids. His fortune grows. He becomes quite wealthy, and finally decides it's time for me to break this work relationship with my father-in-law. And he takes all his belongings and he heads out, kind of sneaks away. And this is so it's on this journey back to go home, basically, that we find Jacob in this situation. So he also learns that on this journey back, Esau is coming to meet him with an army of 400 men.
Right.
So here we have this clash of brothers that's about to happen, and Jacob is really worried about this. He's really scared of his older brother Esau, so much so that he takes all his belongings in his camp and divides it into a couple of pieces, so that if one is attacked, the other might escape.
Right.
So that's how concerned he is about his family and about his belongings. And then right before this happens, the wrestling story, he takes what's left of his family, his wives and his kids, and he sends them on ahead of him, and he is now alone in this wilderness, I guess you could say. He's by himself, and he's going to spend the night wrestling with God. So let's pick this up, Genesis 32, in verse 22, and let's just read this account. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He then took them and sent them across the stream and everything else he had, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." And he said, "Why is it that you ask me my name?" And there he blessed them. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him, and he passed Penuel, whatever that is, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. So, what are we supposed to get from this story? Well, let's break the story down a little bit and ask a few questions. So, Jacob is now alone. Why, Trevor, do you think he's now alone? What was his thinking to send his wives and kids? It's just so strange to say wives and kids. I just it's just not in our culture to say that. But why does he send his family, the last of his belongings, across the stream, as it says, and why is he alone now?
Well, he sent them with a message that in case they were to run into Esau, that he sent his gifts ahead to his lord Esau,
That's
and
right.
that he is the servant because
Yeah.
he's so afraid.
Yeah.
And so I think he's trying to delay the inevitable of getting to his brother because he's so scared.
Right. And trying to appease him, right? So with the gifts,
Right.
like you mentioned, that's true. I didn't mention the gifts in the story. That's a very good catch. He did break out pieces and send them ahead as gifts, as peace offerings, I guess you could say. But why stay by himself that night?
It's a good question. I'm not sure why he to pray, maybe
Yeah, I think probably so. I think this is his last attempt to talk to God about what's going on.
mhm.
It doesn't really say why he left himself alone there, but I have to believe that at this point he's done all he can to prepare for what's going to happen, and he's gonna spend the night alone praying and asking God for help. I just think that's
Right.
what's going to happen. So I think you're right. So then we have the wrestling scene. As soon as it says he was left alone, it says, "And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day." So the first question is, who is the man?
Well, we later find out that it is God in human form,
You right?
correct?
That's correct.
Maybe it initiated when he was by himself and started to pray, that God decided that he needed to come see him face to face.
Yeah, God initiates this match, doesn't he? It
Mhm.
says a man came and wrestled with Jacob. It doesn't say Jacob wrestled with a man. It
Right.
says the man came and wrestled with Jacob. So here we have God. We do see that later, that Jacob firmly believes, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life's been delivered." So he's wrestling with God here, but God initiates the match, if
Mhm.
you can call it that. So and they wrestled all night long, which I if you ask
That's
me,
a long.
that's a long time to wrestle. I mean, if you think sundown to sun up, to be in a wrestling match that long, I know, really, I've got two different images in my mind right now. I've got Greco-Roman wrestling like you see in colleges and high schools,
Right.
and I see WWE guys coming off turnbuckles, smashing each other with chairs,
Right.
and dirty managers running around outside with, doing crazy stuff, cheating and all this kind of stuff. So somewhere between those two images, we've got these two guys who are fighting and
hmm
or wrestling, as it says. Um, and that's I can't imagine going 15, 20 minutes, much less
Yeah.
all night. So there is some determination here, I think, is the point of the all night.
Right.
There is absolute, just whatever we're after here, whatever we're fighting for here. I'm not quitting until I get what I want, or I'm dead. I
Right.
have to believe it's
And
one of those two.
Jacob wanted to be blessed. And so
Yeah,
maybe that's why he wouldn't give up.
right. So, what was the outcome of the wrestling match?
Uh, an injury.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's one thing. That's right.
he was then renamed,
He got a new name, but who won the
and
match?
I, I don't think anybody
It sounds
won.
like a draw, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, here's it. Uh, it does say. Um, Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So that kind of makes me feel like Jacob had the upper hand. And he
Yeah,
said, "I'm not
possibly
going to
so.
let you go."
Possibly.
Maybe he had him in a nice choke.
Had he been a Nelson, half Nelson kind of deal.
Yeah. Um, I'm not going to say Jacob beat God in a wrestling match. I'm not going to be that guy that says it.
That's kind of weird to say, isn't it? That a man fought with God all night and no one prevailed. I mean, it was. But he did say and you've wrestled with God and with men and have prevailed. So it sounds to me like what Jacob wanted, he got.
hmm
Now, you mentioned that there was an injury involved. Okay, so now we have to, with that injury. What was the injury?
he basically dislocated his hip.
Dislocated his hip, and who did it to who?
God touched Jacob's hip.
Yes. So I have to say this right now. How many preachers on TV say God will not do anything to harm you? He only wants to bless you, and he only wants to heal you.
I've seen quite a few.
Yeah. Now here we have an example, a biblical example, where yes, God blessed Jacob, but it included God injuring, not healing, Jacob. He put his hip out of socket so that from that point on, he walked with a limp caused by God. So if you ever hear anyone say, God only wants to heal you, he never does anyone harm, physical harm is right here in the scripture caused by God to Jacob, who is now named Israel.
Correct.
Right? Hey,
Okay.
Jameson's behind you. You ran away.
We're wrestling tonight.
Awesome. Awesome. Don't dislocate his hip.
I won't. I promise.
So that's my point. All right. So God sometimes will put your hip out of joint, and it is probably the best. If he does that, know that is the best thing for you. It is part of the blessing. Because later on in the story, we see that when Jacob and Esau finally meet, Jacob is completely humbled at this point and completely relying on God for what he needs at that point, and that is reconciliation with his brother. And I believe the limp right, is part of that. He softened him up maybe a little bit with the gifts that he sent ahead, and now he comes and sees Esau, and Esau sees him limping, and he's like, I can't do what I had in mind to do with these 400 men. My brother is compromised. He's compromised physically, and that allowed them to embrace and have a great reunion and go back. So, does God always want to bless you as a Christian? Absolutely yes. What does that look like? Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it hurts. So,
I think people, they lose sight, when they ask for things, that it's all going to be just a blessing given to me without any type of like sacrifice or any type of hardship to get to that blessing.
Yeah. You're so right. So here we have Jacob with a limp. He's got a new name, but I think he also blessed him with an increased faith, right? Because now, he has to rely on God. So
Yes.
the big question now is, what do we get from this story? What can we, as modern, 21st century Christians, get from this story? And I guess we have to ask the question: can we wrestle with God? Is it possible for us now to wrestle with God? And I think metaphorically we can say yes.
Yes.
I hope to never wrestle with God physically, because I don't think I could wrestle like Jacob did. I think I'm going
Can we
down.
just wrestle for 10 minutes,
I
maybe
think,
15?
I think probably 15 seconds I'm tapping out.
Right.
But yeah, metaphorically, I think we do wrestle with God. I think we should wrestle with God a lot.
Right.
But what over? We have our own failings and shortcomings and needs and wants and things that we need to wrestle with God sometimes about. Sometimes we want things we shouldn't want. We need to wrestle with God about that, to have our will changed to align with His will. Sometimes we want things that we believe are God's will, is God's will, and we should wrestle with God about that. We have not because we ask not. That's, that little phrase comes from the Bible. So a lot of things that we don't have, it's because we haven't asked for them, or at least not persisted in asking for them. So I think there is a right kind of wrestling with God. And I think anything we can bring to God, we can come with a perseverance in prayer. Especially if it's over someone we love who isn't saved, especially things like that. We can wrestle with God over them and ask and ask and ask and plead and ask for His blessings in that. And I think God does want to bless us. I think He really, really does. But I think we have to have our perception changed on what blessing is.
Mm-hmm.
It might be material things, but it might not be. And it might look like God is not blessing us when He is, right?
Correct.
I've got a friend who listens to this podcast, and his name is Chuck. He's just had his second leg amputated, and he has handled it with such joy and grace, and was excited to get the second leg done, right? Because he knew it was going to be better for him, and his faith has grown in this whole scenario, and he's become one of my heroes. He's just amazing, and his humor is just great. Sometimes we don't get physically healed, but sometimes we get a limp that glorifies God more than our physical healing. So, so what kind of physical, or what kind of blessings can we expect from God? What can we ask for? What can we wrestle for, that God would bless us with?
I think, direction or purpose in life.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people try to figure out what their plan or their purpose is on their own, in their own way, or force things without really seeking God. Like, hey, show me what your plan is for me, and
Yeah.
let me, guide me in that direction. Not let I think I have a plan. I need to follow that plan.
Yeah.
I pray that God uses me however He wants to use me,
Mm-hmm.
and I pray that constantly because for a while I didn't know how I should be used. So I continuously pray, how use me as a tool to do your will, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a blessing in itself, to have that ability to share God's love, His peace, His blessings. I mean, He's blessed me when I don't deserve it.
Oh yeah.
So I don't ask for material things. I ask for things that you can't touch, just things you can experience, opportunities.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. I do pray for healing, the healing of people's hearts,
Yeah.
of my heart,
That's
soul, my thoughts. Not so much physical healing, because I think that's part of God's process,
Yeah, I think it can
His
be.
plan for our lives.
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong to pray for physical healing, because God can get glory from that as well, and I've seen it
Right.
happen as well.
You've experienced it.
Well, I have, but it wasn't a supernatural kind of healing that most people are actually looking for, right?
Right.
Let's take this tumor and make it disappear
Right.
kind of healing. It
Be
was
gone.
yeah, it was the let's go through the process and come through it.
Right. I
To
think
God's
that's a
glory.
more appropriate prayer, for healing.
Sure, but I
Um,
mean, and I've seen the other happen too, where we've prayed for people to be healed, and they didn't have to have the surgery, or they didn't have to have all the treatments or whatever, and that's awesome too. When
Right.
there's a bigger purpose behind that. So I have a guy I used to know back in South Carolina who was a grandfather and was diagnosed with cancer, and he was given a number of weeks to live. And he saw in his Bible where it says, if anyone is sick, call for the elders, let them anoint them with oil, pray for them, and and ask God to heal them. And he did that. And the next scan he did, he was clear.
Wow.
Then a year later, the cancer came back, and shortly after that, he died. He was asked after the cancer came back, why do you think God healed you and then allowed the cancer to come back? He said, I'm not surprised at all. And they said, what do you mean? He said, the only thing I asked God for was to live long enough to see my grandson saved. And I've seen that. And God took him home after that. And I thought
Right.
that that that's the reason you ask for healing, right?
Right.
That's the right response.
Yeah.
To see others come to Christ,
Mhm.
either through or because of that healing, and then once that's been used up, it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll glorify God in heaven. That's awesome too.
Heck
So anyway, thought that was a great example that he set. So, anything else you think we can get from this story, Trev?
It shows you the power of God. I think the fact that Jacob wrestled with God all night long, tangled back and forth, and then just in one touch he dislocated his hip. That just shows you just the strength and the power of God, and like that he could have easily defeated Jacob if he wanted to.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how powerful God really is, and what His plan is. He has a purpose for everything that He does, and
Such a good point. The restraint and the patience of God
yeah,
with us wretched sinners. You know, I've recently watched the video again of R.C. Sproul on a panel taking questions and people talking about the what seems to be the huge overreaction by God to banish Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden for their one little sin, quote unquote, right? And he's like, the problem we have is that we have lost sight of who God is. We think he's this cuddly love teddy bear that sees no wrong in his people, like a doting parent over a spoiled brat child.
right,
When God is this holy, righteous judge of all the universe that cannot tolerate sin in the slightest, and promised Adam and Eve that they would die if they ate. And they ate, and they didn't die immediately. He could have wiped them from the face of the planet right then and there, but he was patient with them,
mm-hmm.
clothed their nakedness out of grace, and sent them out of the garden. And then Sproul turns to the audience and says, "What's wrong with you people?" Yeah, it's just a classic moment. But yeah, God's patience and restraint and ultimate strength and power to allow a man to wrestle with him all night.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's good. I hadn't thought of it from that point. That's really good. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Cool. Well, we appreciate everyone listening to our insane ramblings at the beginning of this show. We appreciate you listening, and we ask you to send your questions in at askitall7days.com, 864-660-9473, voicemail or text. Give us a review on iTunes for the podcast. Let us know how we're doing. Let others know about the podcast, and support us at all7days.com/shop. And remember, this is the All 7 Days podcast, where the goal is to get you to think so highly of God that you forget about yourself. Now go give someone what you value most today.